And meeting with our delegates from the Capitol. This is our steering committee meeting. We have had our regularly scheduled steering committee meeting, but we generally once a year work with our state delegation to have a conversation around some of the questions that the commission might get from their constituents, which are also our state delegation constituents. Before we begin, just kind of want to lay out some ground rules here. I'd like to honor everyone's time. I want to thank first the delegation for making the time to be able to join us tonight. I know you guys are busy with a lot of things getting kicked off now. Thank you for coming back to these chambers to be able to meet with us tonight. A lot of what we do is important. A lot of what you do is important, and it's ultimately for our constituents that we work together. So thank you again for meeting. Commissioners, on your table here, and for those public watching at home, we have crafted a list of about 10 questions that were submitted to me as the steering chair and our committee as a whole around questions that our commission wanted to ask our state delegation, be able to provide some answers back to us as we work together for improvements in Rutherford County and some of the things that are be coming up in 2019. What I would like to do to try to honor both the delegation's time and the commission's time, we do have a few members that need to leave early due to some prior commitments. I'd like to spend about 5 minutes on each question at the most and really try to stay on that topic. If we do kind of start drifting off topic, I'll probably jump in there, try to correct us and get us back on the road where we can honor what the question is actually asking, try to get some answers from there, and then at the end leave about a 10 or 15 minute window there where if any follow-up needs to occur, or anything that the mayor might want to comment on or the delegation would like to comment on, build that into about an hour-long meeting, because it can get tricky. I don't want to cut people off for the sake of cutting people off, but I do want to honor the integrity of the questions that we've asked tonight. So again, I want to welcome State Senator Don White, Representative Brian Terry, Representative Charlie Baum, and State Senator Shane Reeves again to the chambers. The steering committee is in front of you on this side. We do have other commissioners here that are serving on other committees that might have some questions at the end. But again, these questions were submitted to the steering committee. So I don't know who wants to answer the questions. You're all welcome to answer those if you feel like there's multiple answers that are required. I know that you have had some time to look at some of these questions and do some due diligence there, because we did want you to be able, at least I wanted you to be able to not just come up here unprepared and hear a question for the first time, not be able to research it. So hopefully that's been able to happen, but I will read the questions. Any of the other steering committee members are welcome to ask follow-ups. I would just ask again that we try to keep it within that 5-minute window so we can honor some time. So for the public, obviously we're going to read these out loud as well, but number one, this was probably one of the bigger questions, so I will lead off. How does our legislative body intend to help with the expanding costs for school construction and education in Rutherford County? Obviously we're one of the fastest growing counties, so I would like to ask that question. Our delegation is, what are your plans or ideas about helping Rutherford County in dealing with the cost of education?
First of all, Brad, thank you so much for having us. We always enjoy this meeting to get to hear and have feedback from the commission, and understand what is important, because, you deal with day in and day out the Rutherford County budget and funding our schools and all of the things, roads and projects and buildings that go into Rutherford County, and, we're here to help you along the way, anything we can do. But about schools, of course, it's a BEP formula, and all the commissioners know about schools are funded through the state by BEP, and there's 48 components to the BEP, and it varies what is all these components and how much percentage each of these components get. Of course, all of the counties touching Davidson is experiencing the same problem as Rutherford County. They're building a school a year. But the problem is, if we give more money to those growing counties, then the small school districts puts a lawsuit on the state. And we've dealt with that in the past. Of course, there is a lawsuit going with the two major counties, the largest ones, Shelby County and Davidson County, that are saying we need more money. And, we totally agree, because you're having to fund a school a year, where some rural counties probably haven't built a school in 30 to 50 years. So we always are looking at the BEP formula, how to give growing counties more money without causing a lawsuit and getting tied up because they say it's unconstitutional that we're treating some students in some counties better than other students in rural counties and counties that are not growing. So, there are things we can do. I know my first year as a rep, I did a bill that said maintenance of effort. If an air conditioning in a school goes out and that's, $50,000 to $100,000 to replace, you don't have to put it back in that budget. It's a one-time expenditure. That helps in costs, that helps in savings, and, we are up here to hear feedback. If you have an idea, if you have a suggestion on how you believe we can help you, we would love to hear it, but it's all in the BEP formula. Of course, it's been set at this rate for some time now, and I think it's definitely time to look at increasing the BEP formula to all districts, and especially the growing ones.
Any other members? Yeah, Representative Terry.
Thank you, Brad, and thank the County Commission for having us up here to discuss these issues. As far as school construction and the cost of education, a couple of things that I want to bring out. I've heard of a bill that they're looking at in the Senate that may be brought forth for growth counties, high-growth counties like Rutherford County, Williamson County, that may increase the amount of funding that we can get outside the BEP. So that's something that I've heard that's potentially out there. And the two things that I want to bring forth that in the question you're talking about the cost of construction, one thing that we have tried to do is, it's the cost of goods and services, building materials. One thing last year, unfortunately, or last session, that did increase that cost would be the fuel taxes that came through, and that was one thing that we didn't, or Don and I were there, did not support, but that would something that increased the cost of construction. So making sure that we have the construction costs low, or at least try to keep those low, is something that I'll be looking at. The other has to do with how do you attract teachers? That's one of your costs, and the way the system has been recently, teachers, it has not been an attractive field. They don't go into it for money. They go into it for the love of what they're doing, and unfortunately, a lot of what's gone on at the Capitol, I think, has taken some of that admiration and love for what they do out of it, making it more difficult to attract teachers to teach, which drives up your costs. And so that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. We don't know who the new education commissioner is going to be, but how do we make education more attractive for teachers, at least from a love of the profession?
I didn't want to cut off Representative Baum or Senator Reeves. Any follow-up or just an agreement there?
I'll make some comments when we get to number 2.
Okay, sounds good. Just real quick, and thank you for bringing that up to that point. One thing I would like to ask, Representative Terry mentioned, and I'm not sure if anyone out here, even Mayor Ketchner, might have the bill number, but was that something that we could get our delegation support around spending outside of the BEP formula and plan for Rutherford County being a high growth area?
Yeah, I'll look into. I'll have to talk with that specific senator and look into that, and then obviously having the county commission supportive of issues like that. That's one thing that does help us when we try to advocate up there. Oftentimes, we're outnumbered a lot of times with the other reps, and having the county commission at least support us in that endeavor definitely helps get bills through.
Thank you. Any follow-up from the steering committee? Commissioner Reed.
Senator, I like the idea of possibility we look at that formula and what we can do to increase that, because when you look at a formula is designed for everyone. And when you're trying to deal with counties, there's no such thing as all counties are made equal or made alike. It's sort of like raising children. I remember when we started with ours, we had 2, and we tried to work with the formulas everybody told us, but we found out right quick a lot of times one needs hugging and the other one doesn't. And it's pretty much is what we've got to do as far as the cost of these schools out here, and as far as what education is costing in our counties. And anything that can be done from our delegation to help us in this, we need it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to ask Commissioner Craig Harris to follow up with question number 2, please.
Thank y'all for being here. One of the things that we're dealing with is this question right here, and we really want to get some good answers on this. How can we get assistance from our delegation on helping to change the County Powers Act to allow alternative options for revenue?
Okay, I'll jump in on this one. I think that you all have asked me to sponsor or carry the resolution in the House and Senator Reeves to do so in the Senate that would allow the county and the county commission to raise tax revenue from other sources, and probably what you specifically have in mind is the development tax, and I'm happy to do that. I realize that in a growing county like Rutherford County, we're in a position where we're going to need to build about a new school a year. We've got a 5-year capital projects list that amounts to $400 or $500 million. And at the moment, really the main source of tax revenue that we have to generate more funds comes from the property tax. And so I think it would help the county and the county commission out if they had other options. And the County Powers Act, relaxing the state limits on that, I can see how that would help. I'm also aware that that development tax fee hasn't been raised in a long time. I don't know how many years, but certainly over time. 23 years. And so with 23 years worth of price inflation, that amount, is it $1,500? $1,500 today will buy a lot less in terms of a new school than it would 23 years ago. And so to adjust for inflation, that's maybe one of the rationale for why the county needs to have the option of adjusting that. And then just beyond that, I know that state legislators don't like the federal government telling them what they can and can't do. And I think in a similar way, I can see why county governments don't want the next level up from them, the state government telling them what they can and can't do. So I think it makes sense to put trust in our county government, our county commissioners, to make the right decisions, to make adjustments when they're needed, to not make adjustments when they're not needed. During good economic times, when the budget has enough sufficient funding, it's not necessary to raise taxes. But I think that the county needs to have the option to make those decisions without an undue amount of control coming from the state.
Any follow-up from steering committee for that? Or, I'm sorry, Senator
I'm just going to
Reeves.
reiterate a lot of what he said. First, thanks for doing this forum very much. Very honored to be your senator and have the chance to work with these fine individuals up here in the state Senate. And I was looking over this exact act this afternoon and the resolution that you sent to my offices. And I mean, I think everybody up here would agree that at the end of the day, we need to be lifters for the county, not limiters for the county in everything we're doing in serving. So by all means, I think we need to look at options like this because I represent 5 counties, Rutherford, Bedford, Marshall, Moore, and Lincoln counties, and I can promise you those other 4 counties would love to have this problem right now. So I think we need to be open-minded to trying to support you in this.
Thank you. Any follow-up from any commissioner on the steering committee? Commissioner Phillips, did you have a follow-up? Commissioner, would you mind using the mic, Commissioner Phillips, please?
Don't mind at all. Charlie, maybe I ought to address you as Representative Baum. Charlie, okay? Charlie, you made a statement about impact fees. Our resolution is not concerning impact fees. The resolution that the steering committee passed and the Rutherford County Commission passed just asked for relief from the County Powers Act in case in the future we need additional revenues without going to the property taxes. So it doesn't really mean just impact fees. It means the County Powers Act is what we want relief from so that we just have options. And it's not proposing that we do anything, but the options going forward we think is going to be extremely important because it looks like the 5-year plan just from the Board of Education in brick and mortar alone exceeds $550 million. That request. I'm not saying the county commission is going to fund that, but I am saying that the request will exceed $550 million. No sheriffs, no safety, no road improvements, just for the education alone. And I don't know of any math that adds up to any commissioner wanting to raise property taxes to meet that demand. So all we're asking is that we have options other than the property tax. And you hit the nail right on the head. I just wanted to make sure that no one leaves this room thinking that we want anything that deals with impact fees. Impact fees is just one option of several others that's on there. So that's all we're wanting. And I just wanted to make that clarification that what we want is relief from the County Powers Act. So in case we do need it in the next few years, we have those options instead of going to the people constantly and raising property taxes. We don't want to do that. And we need your help in seeing that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Next question on question number 3 is going to be asked by Commissioner Robert Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was one of the submitted questions. What does the delegation see as the most pressing need to address as our representation from Rutherford County? How does this need impact Rutherford County, and what are your plans to address it?
I think Representative Sparks was probably trying to get his bearing after dealing with that, so we'll start with State Senator White.
Okay. Well, I think we are all feeling the growth that Rutherford County, again, we've talked about building a school a year. You know, people realize Rutherford County is a wonderful place to live. We have amazing schools. We have a good community. So people want to come to Rutherford County. And I think one of the main issues we are facing Rutherford County is attracting businesses. Of course, Tennessee's done a wonderful job by doing away with the income tax forever. The Hall income tax, you know, we're a right-to-work state. We are very attractive for businesses to come to Tennessee. And I think as it grows, you know, we're spending, these reps up here and myself and senators, we're spending an hour and a half on the interstates every morning, going into 24. And if you're going to Williamson County, you're spending an hour. And so if we can attract businesses to Rutherford County, people want to stay local. People do not want to have to spend an hour and a half on 24 every morning. And so I believe that if we are looking for businesses, attracting businesses, that will also help with, you know, a lot of the congestion on our interstate, and bringing businesses will help our economy in Rutherford County as well. Another thing that I believe is education. As a former teacher, I have a heart and passion for education, and you know, we are doing so many wonderful things on the state level in education, and I think that needs to continue. You know, Governor-elect Lee has said he wants to look at trades and make that a focus. Well, of course, we have 2 amazing TCATs here. We have one in Murfreesboro, and then we have an amazing one in Smyrna. I think we need to look at how we use those to their benefit of Rutherford County. You know, that's one thing employers are looking at. If I move to Rutherford County, do I have the workforce? And, you know, if with the Tennessee Promise and now with Tennessee Reconnect, we can use those TCATs to say, hey, whatever business is looking at, we have employees ready on day one. They are trained and they are ready to go to work. And I think that's something that I'm very excited about. Governor's Lee administration is he's looking at different ways. You know, a 4-year college degree is not for every student graduating from high school. And I'm very excited that he's looking at that and realizes that that's a path a student that's not college ready or college bound can also take.
Any other comments from the delegation around that topic? Dr. Terry.
Thank you. I really just want to echo what what Dawn mentioned, and that's growth is probably the biggest issue that we have. And with that, two things. Families and businesses look for pretty similar things within where they want to locate or relocate. They want, businesses want an educated workforce. They want affordability and livability. The things that I talk about are safety, health, affordability, recreation, tourism, and education. And so, from our standpoint, how do we attract? If we know we're attracting families here, so how do we attract the businesses and grow the economy here? So, making sure that we have safe communities from a healthcare perspective, ensure that we have quality healthcare here in the county, make sure it stays affordable, support the recreation tourism here at MTSU, and then from an education standpoint, make sure that we have the best education system in the state. And those are things that I think at the state level that we can focus on to improve the needs here in Rutherford County.
Thank you. Representative Sparks.
Yeah, sorry to be late. Traffic on I-24 was pretty bottlenecked, to say the least. It was at a standstill north of Old Hickory Boulevard. I'd say, often like a quote that Harry Gill used to say, he says, oftentimes where you stand is from where you sit. And I always loved that quote. Me and Harry Gill would often disagree because we sat from different seats. I've sat in your seat, so I kind of understand the needs that the county commission faces. But recently, I had the new Speaker of the House, Glenn Cast, on WGNS with me, and I was really proud of what Glenn said. And I was proud of Dr. Terry this morning with MTSU. He said that the priorities for the state of Tennessee would be mental health would be the first one. Second one would be the opioid crisis. Now, this is Glenn Cass saying this, okay, with all due respect. 3, prison reform. I was surprised when he said, I'll be honest with you, Senator Mayor Kitchen, I was surprised he said that. But I was pleased he said that because I think mental health is one of the main issues that we need to look at in this county. Just last week I spoke at Mid-Cumberland Department of Children's Services and some other groups, and I heard a judge of all people out of Dixon, Michael Meese is his name, and he talked about being born again. Well, I see born again as a spiritual experience. He's talking about a paradigm shift, being born again, seeing things from a different paradigm. And I think that really hit home to me because I think oftentimes we got to look at a different paradigm to solve some of these problems. But he talked about the broken homes and the broken families and how people are different. I had a dad in the household that taught me discipline, that taught me a work ethic. A lot of folks don't have that, and that's an area that's never represented. No one ever talks about the fatherless, but I dare say that has a big economic impact on families that are raising a child by themselves that doesn't have a lobbyist. But the myriad of issues that we deal with in the General Assembly, as Mayor Kitcher knows, it goes from A to Z. So oftentimes, going back to what Harry Gill said, oftentimes where you stand from where you sit. We've had such great investment in this county. I could go on and on about the $40 million Nissan TCAT or the $27 million third building at Motlow, and I appreciate this county commission for helping with that, or the new MTSU Science Building, $140 million. We've had great investment in education, but we've got a lot of needs. These roads that are congested, what are the options? Are we going to get that bullet train? Mayor Kitchen, we're going to get that bullet train. But we've got to explore options. We've got a housing crisis. We've got seniors. I called today about Smyrna Senior Housing Authority. They've got a 2 to 4 year waiting list, and I don't think they've got any planned units in the future. I think that's an issue that we need to address. I'd like to see the county commission see what the county can also do to help address that. Maybe there's some type of some discussion with the state of what can be done. But there's so many issues out there that need addressing. And again, I'm sorry to be late with all this traffic, though.
That's okay. Thank you, Representative Sparks. I want to honor our time, so we're going to keep moving through this. We're going to go ahead and jump to question number 4, which actually ties into Representative Sparks' pain point there. Any ideas as it relates to traffic flow from Rutherford County? Obviously, I'm sure this is not the first time you've heard this, probably in the last hour. But I saw the SMART corridor and some of those conversations. Has our delegation given any future thought on what we might be able to do from Rutherford County as it impacts? I know there was, I think Senator White mentioned, if we get better jobs in Rutherford County, it makes it easier for people to stay here at home instead of having to travel to Nashville. Any thoughts from our delegation on what they're going to work on in 2019 to improve traffic conditions for I-24? I know it's a dagger question, so tread softly.
So I have a whole new appreciation for that I-24 drive in the last year. You know, we're going to have another 1 million people move to Middle Tennessee between now and 2035. So if we've got a congestion issues now, you can only imagine where we're going to be as it keeps moving forward. I continue to feel like there's 3 things that are absolutely fundamental as we think through the overall transit issue. Number one, we got to have a regional approach. We can't fix it in Rutherford. We can't fix it in Davidson, Williamson, Wilson, Sumner. We got to have a regional approach at this on how we get it done. The second thing is we need to embrace 2030, 2035 technologies that are in the pipeline: autonomous vehicles, intelligent HOA lanes, working from home. My HR director just got back from a seminar in the last couple of days talking about the new employee of the future. People are working from home. They're working from Starbucks. They're working from different places. So we need to embrace the trends for the workforce. And the third thing, I continue to struggle with. I just don't want to strap my children with more debt because of us putting enormous infrastructure in place over the next 10, 15 years to meet the needs of this, if it's going to be outdated. So regional, embrace technology, and being sensitive to the amount it's going to cost. But there is no silver bullet. We're going to have to chip away at this as it goes.
Thank you, Senator Reeves. Any other, Dr. Terry, I didn't know if you were moving to the mic or not, but please.
Sure. Really, to kind of echo what Senator Reeves said when we talked about a regional approach, one of the things going into Nashville, obviously with the traffic going there, and with the technology that he mentioned, we have Uber, we have Lyft. There, and I've sat down and I've talked with legal services about this, if this is something from a private-public partnership. Up until this last year, I had not ever taken an Uber or Lyft, and I talked with those drivers quite a bit, and I didn't tell them I was a state rep or anything, but I was just trying to get some feedback. And one of the things when they had the discussion on the transportation system in Davidson County and the billions of dollars that was going to cost, how much that potentially could fund just trips with Uber or trips with Lyft. And one thing that we could potentially do, and that's one thing that these drivers had mentioned, is that if you had hubs outside of regional hubs, and maybe they got a break on the gas that they had, gas tax break, and maybe they had maintenance for their cars, or if somebody that drives there, they get maintenance on their cars, and then whatever businesses they have that they're going to downtown, maybe they had some incentive in order for people to park outside and drive in. Those are some things that I think that we could look at potentially to solve some of these problems with the traffic that's going in, and use some of what we have technology-wise to come up with some solutions.
Thank you. We're going to move on. Any follow-up from steering? If not, we're going to move to question number 5, and that's going to be asked by Commissioner Michael Rather.
I want to thank you guys as well for all being here today, and I know it's a rough drive from I-24 because I drove it a long time ago when it was 2 lanes, so I know how it is now. What are your plans or ideas to continue to work to improve school safety for students, teachers, and the employees?
I want to say that I'm proud to have worked with this commission to fund SROs in our high schools. We had SROs in our middle schools and high schools, and we added a full-time SRO to our elementary schools, and our high schools now have 2 full-time SROs. And that's something most counties in the state have not done or been able to do. There's some legislators in the House who are discussing legislation to provide some state funding for counties in order to add SROs. I don't know exactly what the cost will be or whether this will be something that will ultimately pass or not. But I am proud of what we've been able to do in Rutherford County, and I know that that would either be something that would be useful for the state to support in other counties, or maybe to provide some reimbursement for the counties that are already doing it. It seems like it's not only something that promotes safety, but the SRO, the officers provide mentoring for the students and a number of other services that have a lot of value as well.
Senator White, sorry.
You know, we're very fortunate here in Rutherford County to have an SRO. And just like Representative Baum says, you know, they do so much more than just protect the school. They make sure that kids go home to a safe environment, that kids have what they need over the weekend, food and clothes, because they make relationship with these children. And so we are very, very fortunate here in Rutherford County to have that. But some counties do not have the benefit that we do in Rutherford County. And bills have been proposed in the past to allow extensive training. If you have a carry permit and you are a principal, administrator, or teacher, then some bills have said up to 40 hours extra training in order for them to carry and to protect the students if, God forbid, a mass shooting happened at their school. And so I think we've got to look at something like that. And, you know, if the county commission is in agreement, if someone wants to go through the extensive training after getting their carry permit in Rutherford County, allowing a principal or administrator to carry as well.
Dr. Terry, I want to make sure too, and I know Senator White and Representative Baum and others make sure we would include our school board as well to get their feedback as well. I'm completely aligned with your position. I feel the same way, but as long as we represent the county commission here, but I want to make sure we engage our school board and education leaders as well, because that will be, I'm sure, a huge conversation piece for them. So, Dr. Terry, please continue.
Thank you. As was pointed out earlier, the one-size-fits-all BEP formula doesn't, fit every county, doesn't fit every school district. There are some representatives that have, 5 counties and not one of their schools has an SRO. There is talk of legislation up there that the plan is to put an SRO in every school. The cost on that, I think, was $40 million. But when you do the math on it, to me, that didn't even cover the costs of an SRO. It was like $20,000 per SRO, so it'd still be, as we may get down to a question here about an unfunded mandate from you guys on that. I have had discussions with Governor-elect Lee on this issue. Last year when they had this discussion, I was in a small group, and one of the thought processes that I had out there was school marshals. And I call it the SMART Act, the School Marshal and Response Team Act. And there's other states that have something along those lines where you do have a teacher or an administrator or an off-duty police officer, and it would be, up to the locals to decide how they wanted or who they wanted, so you have more autonomy from that perspective. And if we, at the state, were funding, giving back more funds, you'd have more autonomy in what you could do on that. And if you had, you potentially have 5 people in there that, were tied into the sheriff's department or the police department that, may not carry, but they are part of a response team if something occurred. One of the things that was brought out during this discussion was that if somebody was, if they did carry or had it concealed, or if they had it in a gun safe, perhaps each month they would, along with their gun, they would have a color-coded ribbon or something that they would put on them so everyone would know that they were the school marshal if something occurred. So those are some thought processes out there. I don't know if any of that will come to fruition, but those discussions have been made.
Representative Sparks.
I was going to ask Mayor Kitchen, do you know where they're at on that app? I know I talked to the school, I think it was James Evans, on the app. It was like a safety app for teachers and students. I don't know if we didn't get to talk about that at the school board meeting a few weeks ago, but I'm kind of curious where they're at on that. Does anybody know? I know they were looking at designing an app for school safety, maybe something to look into. I was at a school I think it was last year, and I'm talking to, won't say what high school it was, but I asked the students point blank, I said, what would you do if you knew someone had a gun in school? And I was surprised. A lot of the students said, I wouldn't rat on another student. And they said a boy did get ratted on, and he had to move, they had to move, the family had to move. Now, people may be uncomfortable with me talking about that. I'm just telling you what I witnessed these young people tell me. And I won't say what I'll talk to you after this meeting if you want to. I'll tell you what class it was, who the teacher was. Great teacher, by the way. Back when I was on the county commission, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't for SROs. Because when I grew up, we didn't have problems like that growing up. We just had a principal that just busted your tail when you got out of line. Didn't you, Commissioner Gurley? When you got out of line, they just straightened you up. It's a different day to day. One of the main complaints I get with teachers, I just had a teacher call me earlier, is lack of discipline in the classroom. That's one of the biggest complaints I hear. And that goes back to the correlation of catching these young men when we have a fatherless rate that is an epidemic. And I don't feel like people really care about that issue. But this gets back to the root of the problem. Other counties, we're blessed in this county. We're very prosperous. Some of these rural counties, at Pettis, you've been to some of these rural areas, some of these folks they're poor. They don't have money. That $30,000 that we pat ourselves on the back, like, yeah, we've done a good job, that's a drop in the bucket. You know, so if a bill's going to help Representative David Byrd's area, he knows what's best for his district. I'm going to be supportive of what his bill is. Here, we've got SROs. We're very blessed, but you know, we do have our challenges with growth. Some of these other communities probably wish they did have growth.
Thank you. I think probably for most commissioners, that's always one of the hardest questions to ask, because we shouldn't have to be talking about school shootings. We've got a huge crisis of morality in this country that's a symptom of it. And I appreciate your feedback on that thing, because it's always a tough question. Nobody wants to talk about it. But from a leadership perspective, I think we have to be open to anything that we need to do to protect our children. So thank you for your feedback. Question number 6 is going to be asked by longstanding commissioner here. I think he's probably known anyone that's ever served in the delegation, because Commissioner McAdoo's been here forever, but Alan McAdoo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, I'd like to thank our delegates for being here tonight. And I can make this statement that anytime I want to talk or communicate with a delegate, you're not hard to find. So that is real good that you are available to your constituents. My question deals with health care. How does our delegation plan to contribute to the growing discussion around quality health care for all Tennesseans?
I think the two that probably get that question the most looked at each other. So Dr. Terry or Senator Reeves can answer that first.
Well, considering that this is the new chairman of health, and I'm the vice chair of health in the Senate, hopefully we can work together to do some good things. Thanks for the question. You know, so 91% of people in the state actually do have health care. They have some kind of health care. So it's not like the entire system is just completely broken. But we do have a percentage of the population that does not have health care. And for as healthy as we are as a state fiscally, and we are healthy fiscally, balanced budgets, low taxes, from a health perspective, we're really in the ditch right now. I was looking at some numbers here in the last day or two. We're 47 in adult smoking, 42 in heart disease, 47th in stroke, 46 in lung cancer, 45 in diabetes rate, 41st in infant mortality. But we literally are at the bottom of the bottom in almost every single metric when it comes to health in the state. So we do have a problem. We absolutely do need to address it. And I think there's not any one silver bullet that we can do to fix it, but I think it's going to take a number of different initiatives. And it's got to be transparent, and we got to have access. We need to have accountability. We need to measure what we're doing and put things in place. And there's a couple pieces of legislation I'm working on. I know he's working on as well to hopefully move the dial in those directions. But it's a big issue, not just Rutherford County, it's everywhere. But those 9% that don't have health care, we've got to come up with some kind of plan.
Thank you. Great question. Again, I appreciate it. I have been named chairman of health in the House, and underneath my committee will be 3 subcommittees. We'll have mental health and substance abuse. That's I suspect a lot of the opioid legislation. We're probably going to have to rework some of the legislation that had come through last year and further address that this year. There's still an opioid problem going on. In fact, we've had over double the amount of testing that has occurred for fentanyl that's out in the communities and out in the state. Public health is another one of the committees that'll come through, and then the other is facilities, and obviously that's one of the concerns that have been throughout the state with some rural health care facilities. And one of the issues has been really the business model for medicine has changed for one way or the other. And one of the big concerns that we have is attracting what I would call revenue-producing physicians or revenue-producing procedures into rural health care. And what has happened over time due to the business model and due to compensation and particular compensation disparities is that you just don't have those providers out there. They're consolidated. They're coming more into urban areas. And one thing that we do have in the House, I've been named to the Insurance Committee as well, and I'll serve on. Underneath that, there are 3 committees. There's Property and Casualty, there's TennCare, there's going to be Health Insurance, and I'm going to be on the TennCare Committee. And one thing we know from TennCare is that they don't pay physicians or providers or hospitals the same in Rutherford County that they may pay in another county. And I want to know, what the disparity is between that, and if so, we need to correct that, because if we are underpaying underserved areas, then that's where there is a discrepancy in the providers going out there. So how can we address that? That's one of the things that we'll be looking at in the House.
Thank you. Any follow-up from any commissioners? If not, we'll move to question number 7, and that question will be asked by Commissioner Pettis-Reed.
I'm honored to ask this question due to the fact that when I first began as a commissioner here, I sat beside Commissioner Doug Schaefer from Laverne in public safety, and if there was one thing he always asked was this question on everything we did. And I guess I'm asking this in his memory for this commission right here, and it always dealt with unfunded mandates. And how will the delegation work to stop the unfunded mandates that get passed down to the county from state and federal government?
I'll make a few comments about that. I served for 8 years with Doug Schaefer, and so I remember us discussing unfunded mandates, but it was really a concern of all commissioners, not just Commissioner Schaefer. I think one thing we need to do when we're in Nashville is explain to folks what a burden it creates for local entities when the state passes a law and then either doesn't fund it or doesn't fully fund it. I've got lots of stories and examples I can use from the commission, but we heard an example just this morning when we were meeting with leaders at MTSU, and they told the familiar story where the state passes, in their example, the state passes a pay increase of, say, 3%, but then only funds 50 or 55% of it, and then relies on the university to pay for the remainder of the salary increase for the employees. And then at the same time tells MTSU, don't raise tuition and things like that. Whether it's a university like MTSU or whether it's a county government, these unfunded mandates create real problems when it comes to funding them at the local level. So what we've got to do in Nashville is we need to look at the legislation and look at the fiscal note that's on the legislation, and then be aware of what portion would be paid by the state and what, if any, would be paid by local governments. And the state needs to do as much as it can to limit these kinds of unfunded mandates or prevent them entirely where possible.
Representative Sparks.
Yeah, I used to serve as vice chairman of local government, and we would see a lot of bills come through that would that could potentially have an impact on the school board or county commission or a local municipality. And I'd watch for those things, and I can remember making the comment because we had something that was going to financially affect. I think it was some counties, and a guy sitting beside me, he had never served locally. Okay. And I was making my argument, this is not a good bill, this and that. And he said, well, you big government people, talking about me, big government, what are you talking about? I said, no, you've never served locally, so you don't know. He's never served. That's a good thing about someone served on the commission or a city council, because you do kind of see inside baseball, like Senator Kitchen or Mayor Kitchen has seen. One thing that I'd like to hear, and I heard Representative Rudd say this to MTSU this morning, is just specifically identify what the mandate is. That way we can address it. And if there is something, and I shared this with Mayor Burgess years ago, just identify what they are, and then let us know, communicate with us what they are. And if you see anything going forward, I don't know if steering addresses that. I would think they would, whether it addresses public safety or addresses education or health care, let us know what they are. But if we don't have anybody communicate with us and specifically saying, this is an issue right here that we need to amend, take off the books, I'm all about it, and I think that's where we need your help. And Representative Rudd, I was proud of him this morning because he asked Doc McPhee identify what the mandate is. What's the mandate? And I was proud of him to say that, because if we don't know what the mandate is, how do we know? And that's what communication is all about. But that's one thing I'm proud of that mayor right there, because he'll pick up the phone and he'll call us and he'll let us know, and we see him on a 3 or 4 times a week, I guess we see you, Senator or Mayor, and I'm proud of that, because you'll let me know what your thoughts are. But we don't know unless someone picks up the phone and lets us know what that mandate is.
Thank you. Question number 8, and I appreciate again everyone focusing on this to honor time. Thank you for, we're not trying to cut anyone off, but thank you for being diligent on this. Commissioner Craig Harris is going to tackle question number 8.
So there's quite a bit of legislation you can definitely consider in this position. So, from a macro level, there's some very high-level things that I'm going to be working on the Health Committee. I'm taking a look at some legislation regarding smoking. I've been asked to tweak the existing opiate bill, which I believe is going to have an impact, continue to move that in the right direction. PBM's, prescription benefit management, I'm going to do some work on that this year. And I've also got something with certificate of needs. All of this is in the healthcare space. It's about creating competition and transparency and accountability in health. So those are big macro level issues. And then more from a micro level, and I know we'll probably be working on a lot of this together, there's the Powers Act that we just mentioned a minute ago. There's a Police Powers Act. It's the one that Larry Farley brought before this commission a few weeks ago as well, that we're going to be working on. There's a piece of legislation that Doug Bottery has sent me regarding insurance. I know Mayor Ketron's been copied on that as well, as far as tweaking the way the county can elected officials, the way they can handle insurance. I need to understand it better before I talk about it publicly, but it can save the county a good bit of money as well. I need to learn more about that. And I'm also working on a couple things specifically for MTSU. So there's some macro issues and some micro issues that I hope to tackle, and probably some more that I'll find out about in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Representative, I would actually like on this one if you can indulge us by each giving an answer on that, because this question was asked by multiple commissioners.
I'm working on several things, but let me mention a couple of things that maybe have local impacts. One would be the County Powers Act. Another one that I want to carry is the naming of the bridge over Broad, Blue Raider Bridge. one of the committees I've been appointed to is the Finance Committee, and the other committee is the Education Committee. And one of the capital projects that MTSU is seeking to have funded is one that would be for their concrete management program. It's currently listed as the third highest project on THEC's list, and I'm interested in doing what I can to make sure that it stays at least in that spot so that it will hopefully be funded. I think that would be great for the community to get another big academic building like that. I've got a couple of other things that I'm working through the details. I'm a little bit like Senator Reeves here. Until we get some of the details ironed out, I hate to say too much. Some of these things still could be subject to change, but we'll know within several weeks exactly the language that some of these pieces of legislation will take.
Thank you for the question. There's several things, obviously, from a health perspective that I'll be working on, dealing with the opioids, dealing with fentanyl, carfentanil, as far as the penalties, addressing that. As Senator Reeves talked about, the pharmacy benefit managers, the middleman in healthcare has there's not a lot of transparency in what's going on with that. One thing that I did this past year, I had an amendment that got rid of the gag clause that has been applied from pharmacy benefit managers onto pharmacists, that you could potentially pay for your prescription at a lower cost. Ultimately, President Trump talked about that, and they passed that at the federal level, so that's something I was proud to be able to do. We're going to look at TennCare and some of the issues that are going on with that. As we talked about the arson investigation here locally, there's a state relief and empowerment waivers from a healthcare perspective that may allow us to get lower cost health insurance. We'll be looking at that in our committees. I've got a few constituent issues that will be coming up, and then probably one of the bigger issues that I've got is an agricultural medicine bill dealing with medical cannabis, and that will be something that I'll be bringing forth this session as well.
One of the reasons my colleagues and myself will be very vague is bill file deadline is going to be around the second week of February. Of course, we're out and we'll be going back in within the next 2 weeks to actually start going through bills and working on bills. But of course, we all have an agenda. Of course, education is where my heart and passion lies, and so we're looking at some of the education bills, reform, and that kind of thing. One thing that was held over from last year, and I'm planning on carrying it again. Rob Mitchell brought this to me this last year, and it says, of course, in the Constitution, we can still have a state property tax. Now, I'm not touching counties, so I don't need all these emails and all these phone calls. I understand that's how y'all fund a lot of things here in Rutherford County, so I'm not touching that. But our Constitution says that at any time we could go back to a state property tax, where the state can put a tax on property. And so, you know, we are so business friendly, and we attract so many people here by saying no income tax, and we're doing away with the hall tax. This is just something else that can make us more business friendly, attract more people to Tennessee, and so I will be carrying that for Rob Mitchell as well. And then just various other things House members are bringing to me, and I'm trying to find House sponsors for some of our legislation at this time as well.
You know, years ago when I first got elected, one of my goals, you were asking about goals, was to bring more attention to the drug, what I call epidemic. I took my opponent to lunch, Kent Coleman. I think I've shared this maybe with y'all before, and I got criticized for taking my opponent to lunch. People thought I was crazy. My opponent was a wise gentleman, Kent Coleman. Been a lawmaker for 8 years, an attorney. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. But I asked Kent, I said, we're at City Cafe, and I said, Kent, how come no one seems to care about the drug problem? It just seems like no one cares about this. And when I was a county commissioner, I didn't feel like anybody really cared about it. And he said, Mike, if no one's ever been affected by these issues, they probably don't care. And he goes on to tell me to get on the health committee. My opponent, who everybody thought I should see as an enemy, was very wise. I mean, he was a chairman of civil justice. And he did care about mental health, did care about those things. So I got on the health committee. And one of the goals was to bring awareness to the synthetic drug issue that we were facing. Sadly, a lot of folks were disconnected from that issue. Poison Control Center called, the center wasn't, their calls went up 1,300%. That's an epidemic when you getting calls. 1,300% increase in 1 year. And I went after some dope dealers on my own. We shut them down. We even pulled their beer license. And I want to thank Keith Bratcher that helped me with that. We went to the beer board, and that's how you hit these guys. You hit them in the pocketbook. And I ain't got no use for dope dealers. And the family was getting upset when I was calling them out on WTN, Michael DeGiorno show, and WGNS. But I thank them for that opportunity to do so. But we shut that down, and we still got a drug problem. I think we've helped stop some of the synthetics. It's not went away, sadly. Something I'm working on here that I think may interest some of y'all is ending the statute of limitations on sexual abuse. I was asked by some folks here in this county to look at doing that. Current statutes is 25 years before you can go back and prosecute someone. I requested TASER to do a study. We got that bill passed. They've come back with their report. My viewpoint is not to go prosecute a bunch of people 25 and 30 years. It's going to be difficult to prosecute folks. But this is what I'm seeing when I study this issue. And this is a big issue, okay? 1 in 6 boys have been sexually abused. 1 in 4 girls have been sexually abused. And if you go look and study this issue in depthly, the correlation between alcoholism, incarceration, and the opioid problem is exponential. It's like 26 times more likely folks that have been sexually abused to turn to drugs and alcohol as coping mechanisms. Any input that the folks in the audience or folks at home want to give me, my cell phone, I'll give it out, 525-3198. I think it's a big issue, and I think it's an issue that affects this jail over here that seems to stay at capacity. But I think what I'm saying is people need to get therapy, they need to get counseling. And I was raised in a different world. My dad was military. If you had a problem, you just sucked it up and got over it, moved on. And I asked this to a group. It was a women's advocacy group. And I said, what's wrong with my way of thinking? That's the way I was raised. And some of y'all was raised that way. You know, you just get over it, move on. And they said, this is scientifically proven. The data is there. You can't deny the data. So what I'm saying, folks that have been affected like this, they need counseling, they need therapy. They turn to drugs and alcohol. Their kids wind up in state custody, in the foster care. It all has a big cost. And it doesn't seem, when I look at all the lobbyists in Nashville, and I've said this for years, there's nobody lobbying for those things. I'll challenge anybody in this room, you tell me who that lobbyist is. There's nobody lobbying for those things. This is the issues that we got to get to. But that's something I'm proud of, that we're going to bring awareness to it and maybe help some of the folks, Commissioner Turner, that have been affected by this.
Thank you, Representative Sparks. I think Commissioner Harris had a follow-up question for Dr. Terry.
Here, I've read over your for you, or?
No, not really. I think that that's one of the things that's going to be tasked. What we have, what Speaker Cassada has done with our committee system and breaking it down to where we have public health, mental health and substance abuse, and facilities and licenses and regulations, is each committee is going to be tasked with things like that. So the mental health and substance abuse, that would be something that committee will look at, those type of issues. And from that, as a committee chairman, I've been given the liberty to have 5 more additional bills to file that I'll have as caption bills for something that we could potentially bring through those committees when we sit down and focus in on these issues. So that's something that we would be looking at in that committee.
Thank you. Number 9 is more of just a request and a comment. Obviously, the town of Smyrna has heavy involvement in that, but just making sure we get assistance from our state delegation around Rocky Fork Exchange. You guys are all doing the right thing by looking at me. That always comes from my constituents in Smyrna. So thank you for your help on that. And then finally, just to round out these groups of questions, I think it's very important to understand how our delegation is going to work with Governor-elect Bill Lee. Obviously, he was elected by a significant margin, so I think there's probably some mandates behind that about what he has proposed and ideas he has for our state. How does our delegation plan on working with Governor-elect Lee to make sure that his agenda is accomplished in his first term? And that's for anyone or all to answer.
The 3 things he focused on his entire campaign was vocational schools, and for the trade schools, as in Senator White mentioned earlier. I feel pretty confident that's probably going to happen this time. There's going to definitely be a push behind that. Secondly, criminal justice reform, sentencing reform. I definitely see some of that coming down the pike this time, and I suspect we'll get behind a lot of that. And then third thing is just more of a larger perspective. Let's continue to be a low-tax, high-growth, low unemployment state that's thriving fiscally, and I'm confident we all support those things. Other than supporting his agenda, I think personally in my role, and I'm sure Representative Terry feels the way, I just want to continue to point him toward health care, health-related issues, making sure that's staying top of mind, because that is something that a lot of Tennesseans care a lot about.
I guess I would echo those comments. I want to work with the governor-elect, and I think we'll learn more about the form that will take as his agenda is presented. He's new as governor, and so I think that brings with it some uncertainty. We don't know for sure exactly what positions he'll take on some issues, and so I'm anxious to watch as those positions develop.
Thank you for that question. It's our job as elected officials is to represent our district, not necessarily implement a governor's agenda. Oftentimes, though, we do line up significantly, but with that in mind, what I try to do with Governor Haslam and what I've already done with Governor-elect Lee is I had a meeting with them. I call it my district debriefing. I sit down and talk with them and explain what I consider some of the concerns and issues that we have coming from our district, and then discuss different issues that are out there. And I've already had that with him, and so I look forward to working with him on these issues. I do want to point out that he had a 9-point priority list: creating jobs and growing our economy, education, safe neighborhoods in every community, a healthier Tennessee, supporting our rural communities, growing the agriculture economy, stopping the opioid epidemic, transportation and infrastructure, and an open and responsive government. And of course, one of the bills that I am bringing forth, an agricultural medicine bill dealing with medical cannabis, can help him with 8 of 9 of those priorities. And so I think that working with him on this issue and with all the other issues that we have from the community, I think is something that we can do, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm very excited about Governor-elect Lee getting sworn in on Saturday, and us working as a delegation with Governor Lee. I'm very excited about his education initiatives. I think it will be a great add-on to the Tennessee Promise. What wonderful things we've done. It's given first-generation college, high school graduates that didn't think college was an option for them, an ability to go to college and an ability to have a good future and a sound future, whether it's majoring in, air conditioning repair, plumbing, concrete, or, robotics. It's giving them a future they did not think they could have, and I think Governor Lee is going to just build on what Governor Haslam did with the Tennessee Promise. What's so amazing about the Tennessee Promise is we're able to give high school students 2 years of a technical school or a community college, and not one dollar is being spent. It's all through the lottery scholarship. And so I think we can build on that and have more students graduate from high school take advantage of that. You know, one thing you always know about some person, and anybody in this room will know, if you run for office, people will tell you you're either good or you're bad, and you hear the good and the bad and the ugly. But, you know, setting out at early voting, I met 2 Lee employees that had Lee Company shirts on, and both gentlemen that was working for Lee Company spoke so highly of Governor-elect Lee. So, you know, you know a lot about what your employees say about you. And both gentlemen said, you know, he's an honest man, he treats us fairly, and he has our best interests at heart as employees. So I feel like that will carry on, and Governor-elect Lee will have the best interest of Tennesseans in his mind and heart at all times.
Well, I think most people that have met Bill Lee, he's the real deal, there's no doubt. I met him years ago at my Rotary Club, and he shared the story about his wife passing away from the horseback riding accident. I want to recognize Jackie Archer. Raise your hand, Jackie, back there in the back, and her husband. They had him at their house here just a few weeks ago. And some of these issues that we're discussing here tonight is some of the issues that I talked to him about that night. I've personally seen him being involved with Men of Valor. Commissioner Harris, I've seen him, that helps with addiction, helps men turn their life around. They just expanded a big housing unit up in near the Nashburg Village area, and the sheriff was there. And I like what the sheriff said. He said, I wish I was out of a job one day, because they're talking about recidivism and how this home and some of the programs we're putting together will help curb some of that. But Bill Lee's been involved in that since day one. I like Governor Haslam. I thought he was a good guy. I think Bill Lee, when it comes to some of these issues that's dear to my heart, is a little bit more connected. The vocational school, opioid problem, and that. And I want to recognize Mr. Spurlock. I appreciate your speech at the vocational school over at Smyrna, talking about reaching those students, and I can see the passion in your eyes, so I appreciate that. And I've seen the passion in those students getting that little certificate, that little achievement. And I always remember what Randy Boyd said. Randy, who ran for governor, he's the ECD commissioner. Just someone getting a certificate, whether it's welding or just one little accomplishment, gives them that motivation to seek the next accomplishment. So not all of us are destined to be doctors like Dr. Terry, with all due respect, or economists like Charlie Baum. You know, some are going to be CHVAC mechanics, diesel mechanics, paint and body repair, but there's great programs over there. And if you want more information, just Google TCAT, Smyrna, Nissan, Tennessee College of Applied Technology. Great programs that's being offered over there. But the governor, I just got off phone with his liaisons just now, talking about Jefferson Pike, talking about the fatality. I was on Channel 2 last night that covered it. Ironically, it happened in front of Jenny Williams' house, and I'm going to get him that video to show him the need of that Jefferson Pike being done, needing to be done. If that road is shut down 1 minute, it used to cost Nissan $66,000 a minute. I dare say it's $150,000 a minute when that road shut down. And when there's a wreck like there was the day of fatality, it's shut down. Brian Hercules said, Mike, there was tractor trailers all up down the street. So that's something I'm communicating with Bill Lee about, is getting that video to where he hears the families that have been affected by that road. Thank you, Commissioner Turner. Thank you all for the questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there any follow-up from any of the commissioners that were not on steering, or Mayor Ketron, as we wrap up our time with the delegation? Mayor Ketron? Oh, Commissioner Allen, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to give you one example of an unfunded mandate. And as excited as we are about all the education reforms that have happened, especially on the continuing education side, which we are, and it's been a terrific thing for a lot of families. But one of the unintended consequences is the exponential growth that these colleges have seen. Motlow Community College is currently building their 3rd building, and they immediately need 2 more. And so the responsibility then, in order to fund those through TBR, is that those colleges have to come up with a 10% matching fund. So then they turn to the local community to get those funds. This body gave Montlow $405,000. The Industrial Development Board gave them a significant gift. I don't remember the exact amount. But, and we've done a lot of local fundraising, and we're doing grants and everything else to come up with that money. But then you get donor fatigue. And so now when it comes time for buildings 4 and 5, I don't know how quickly we're going to be able to build those. 40% of Montlow's entire enrollment is at the Rutherford County campus. So we need some relief. We need some way for you to help us figure out how to fund those projects without that burden then coming back on the local community, because I just don't know how we're going to continue to help them and sustain that, and then really maximize this opportunity that you've given us in giving these folks this education. So that's just something I wanted to put on your radar, to be thinking about that. And then this is just one thing for me that's a footnote that I kind of wanted to just sort of plant a seed with you all. I've been on planning for a long time, and we're hearing so much about housing and housing costs and affordable housing. I just want to make sure that we don't confuse the term affordable housing and low-income housing. In the planning world, when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about the price of a home that a first-year teacher or a first-year police officer could afford. That's different than low-income housing. So whenever bills come before you that talk about those things, and I'm sure there will be some, just because we're hearing how everybody's getting, pushed out of the Nashville area, just keep that in mind, that those are two different things, and don't confuse them. Affordable housing versus low-income housing is two entirely different things. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Commissioner Phillips, I think, had something, and Mayor Ketron, I didn't know. We'll let Mayor Ketron wrap up after that.
Thank you, Commissioner Turner. I don't even know how to ask this question, but we've got three. Senator White is really not new to Nashville, but new in the job. And congratulations on the campaigns that you run, and you were very, very successful. And I don't know if I've ever seen a more perfect campaign than Senator White ran, and against a quality opponent, and for that victory. Congratulations for your victory. We're struggling with brick and mortar in Rutherford County, and I've heard you say that a lot of counties would welcome some of the opportunities that we have. I agree with that to a degree, but to another degree, I really don't. A lot of the counties that I know of, where my family is from, like up in Smith County as an example, a lot of those folks don't really want things to change. A lot of them do, but some of them don't. So what we're experiencing right now, we appear to have zero control over. Things are coming. And I've heard it time and time again, whether we want it or not. The Rutherford County that I knew when I was in elementary school no longer exists. And I can't even explain to grandkids what it was like to live in Rutherford County back then. And I'm not saying that that was good and this is bad, or this is good and that was bad. I'm just saying it's different. What we're struggling with is we're always dealing with finances, and we can't seem to come up with enough money to pay teachers, to pay deputies, when we're always spending money on brick and mortar. And that's the type of a thing that some of us have been preaching for a number of years, is that are we looking 10 years down the road and 20 years down the road, and we absolutely positively must do that if we're going to be able to survive with the growth that's coming to Rutherford County. We would like to have options in funding some of the building that we're going to have. Can we look at things differently from a state level? And it might require legislation, and it may not can be done. But I've heard Senator White talk about rainy day funds and how much of a surplus we have in there, the lottery and how much of a surplus is in there. Could some of those funds possibly be created to allow counties like Rutherford County to borrow from those funds and pay back those funds at a lower interest rate than we have to go out and borrow on the market? Could we borrow money from the lottery? Could we borrow money from the state rainy day fund if there's surpluses to build our schools and to pay the state back versus having to pay a bank back at a much lower interest rate? Are those type of things possible? And that's what I'm thinking, and we're thinking, that the state needs to do to help us. Not think like we've been thinking in the past, but think like we need to be thinking in the future to help the citizens of Rutherford County. If we did things like that, we could more afford to give our deputies an increase in pay, which I think they really need, and our teachers an increase in pay, which I think that they really need, and more pay to some of our county employees, which we're having trouble right now in some departments, even finding people to go to work. So those are the type of things that I would like for us to look at. I might not be around at my age to see some of those things come to fruition, but I'd really like for our legislators to say, what can we do differently 20 years from now that would affect us 20 years from now, than just looking at the way we've always done it. If there are funds available, excess lottery funds, and we talk about education and using those funds for education, could we use them to borrow? Could Rutherford County borrow the $84 million that the school board wants to build our next high school and pay the state back versus paying a bank back at hopefully a lower interest rate, something like that? That's what I would like our state legislators to think about when it comes to helping counties. And some of those, how could it hurt some of the counties that are not experiencing the growth that we are? Just think about it. Roads, how long does it take you to get from MTSU to I-24 out by the avenue? 10 years ago, it took you 10 minutes. Now it takes most of your lunch hour just to do that, and it's only going to get worse. So we have to be looking 20 years from now instead of 20 been doing it. And once again, thank you for your service to Rutherford County and the state of Tennessee. We appreciate you, we really do.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Mayor Ketcher, if you want to offer a few comments, then I'll wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to be brief. There's three things I'd like to put before the delegation, and thank you for coming tonight. First was a bill that I was co-prime on last year. It was briefly mentioned by Representative Baum in question number 1. It doesn't matter about the House bills because it's new General Assembly, the 111th, so the bill numbers have disappeared. However, it's important that the sponsors last year, I want you to, if you can, get with them tomorrow, because both of them who sponsored this bill last year are your new leaders, Leader Johnson and Leader Lamberth. And it dealt with the Tennessee Local Education Capital Investment Act for the fast-growing counties, of getting money back into those fast-growing communities, our donut counties, and maybe in some other parts of our state. Very quickly, let me put this on your radar, what this bill entitles. Maybe you can massage it and make it better than what it was last year. I don't know why it didn't come out of subcommittee in the House, but what it does, the school system must have a 2% growth over a 5-year average to be eligible. If the school system is eligible, they would receive state tax, sales tax dollars back from the state general fund. The amount the school system receives back would be equal to 10% of their growth percentage. For an example, a school system with 15% growth would receive back 1.5% of the state sales tax collected in that county. A school system with 5% growth would receive back 0.5% of the state sales tax. The maximum percentage to a school system would receive back would be 2%, and there would be a $7 million cap per school system also If there's multiple school systems in the county, the WFTEADA local sharing percentages that are currently used to share in the multi-school system counties would also apply. So this is for those rapid growing counties, us, Williamson County, Wilson County, Sumner County. Those are the ones that this would, I think that we would fall into. The State Department of Education would calculate the ADM growth annually and submit the eligible school system to the Department of Revenue to send back those revenue dollars that are coming in. So if you would, seek out your leaders, ask them if they're going to sponsor it, ask them if you can be co-prime on that for us, because as you've heard here tonight, our commissioners, Commissioner Phillips said it so well that we're looking for every avenue that we can. When it costs $72 million to build a new high school in Rockville and now an elementary school, it used to be 20, now we're looking at $40 million to build a new elementary school. We've got to find money somewhere. That being said, good luck in working with your leaders, and we wait to hear from you on that. Second is a bill, and even though you don't have a date on your final bill filing date yet, but somewhere around the 2nd of December, our next steering committee, I want to bring a bill on behalf of Paul's, working with Michael. He would like to see, and we'll try to get it to steering. If not, I'll come back to you if we can't get it through steering in an appropriate time to get you to file a caption bill on behalf of Paul's. They are running into some problems with the growth, are also they're having problems at Paul's with our enforcement officers and working with the court systems. They need a little bit more teeth in being able to pick up dogs and cats that are running stray. Because of the growth, that population is also exploding, and we're getting numerous phone calls. So we'll work out the details, try to get it back to you before steering meets. If not, we'll ask you to file a caption bill that opens the caption. Then we'll get the appropriate language after we've met with the steering, got it passed there, full commission, and with consultation of our general counsel. And thirdly, I don't think that sign, Commissioner, was any indication that the bridge is falling. We want to make sure the bridge is named properly. And so thank you, Commissioner Baum, for saying that you're going to carry that. Now we need somebody in the Senate to step up to it. Senator White, I've asked you to carry that since the bridge is actually in your district, as well as the universities in your district, and hope that each and every one of you would sign on to that. That came through the steering committee and was fully passed by the county commission on a vote of 13-7. One member was absent. It would have been 14-7. So hope you can put that into the omnibus bridge and road bill that goes through TDOT, which all of them will be put into. And I think Senator Massey is your new senator and chairman of Transportation Committee. So that would be the appropriate first committee that goes to. So thank you very much again for coming and sharing with our delegation. You're part of us and we're part of you. So we're all in this together, and thank you for serving Rutherford County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor Ketchner. And again, thank you to the state delegation for your time. We certainly have a wonderful delegation that we're proud to serve with, and what you represent. Commissioner Sparks, did you want to
I know
add?
the emissions issue has been a big concern for this county commission, others in the county. I've got information from kind of where we're at on trying to stop the emissions program.
Okay.
I'll hand out to you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you to those in attendance. Thank you to the school board and education leaders, and also members of the public for coming, because this does impact all of Rutherford County. We certainly appreciate your time. And again, thank you to the delegation. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.